Obsession. How to train your brain for the impossible. The violent nature of breakthroughs. Every real transformation begins with a fracture, not a pleasant shift, a rupture, a break so sharp that your former self can no longer be rebuilt. No great breakthrough ever begins in peace. It begins in discomfort, in frustration, in an invisible scream that echoes through your ribcage. This can't be all there is. And that's where obsession is born. Not in calm clarity, but in the chaos of an inner revolt. In the moment you realize that living like everyone else is slowly killing you, that your soul has more weight than the life you've built around it, and that something inside you is done waiting. You've heard all the safe advice. Find balance, set achievable goals, celebrate small wins, pace yourself. But what if that voice telling you to slow down is the very thing suffocating you? What if your obsession isn't a flaw, but a signal, a calling, a divine rebellion against the cage of moderation? The world doesn't reward the balanced. It rewards the undeniable, the ones who leave no room for plan B, the ones who set themselves on fire from the inside and refuse to be extinguished, the people who decide with no applause and no guarantee that they are willing to give up everything they are for what they must become. And yes, they look insane. Because obsession isn't comfortable, it's not pretty, it doesn't ask for permission or explain itself. It consumes, it rewires, it isolates. But inside that furnace, something extraordinary happens. Your mind changes shape, your habits collapse and rebuild, your energy condenses into something lethal, something unshakable. You start waking up differently. You stop checking your phone for meaning. You stop negotiating with your weakness. You stop pretending your dreams are negotiable. And when people ask what changed, you can't explain it. Because nothing changed, and yet everything did. You crossed an invisible line the moment you stopped wanting and started becoming. Obsession is not intensity for a season. It's not a spike of motivation. It's a system override. A complete takeover of the nervous system by a singular vision. You don't just think about the goal. You breathe it. You taste it. It shows up in your posture, in your tone, in your silence. Your entire presence begins to whisper, "I'm not leaving without it." And yet most people will never reach that state. Not because they can't, but because they're afraid of what they'd have to give up. The comfort of distraction, the sedation of entertainment, the approval of average minds, the safety of always having an excuse. Obsession demands all of that, and it offers nothing in return but a brutal path and a distant flame. But that flame, it's not just light, it's memory, it's meaning, it's the proof that you were alive and not just existing. The flame of obsession is what melts away your weakness and reveals the shape of your will. And once you see it, once you feel what it's like to move without resistance, to act without negotiation, to rise with direction, you can't go back. You won't. You'll stop asking for advice. You'll stop chasing inspiration. You'll stop needing permission. You'll look at the world with colder eyes, not out of anger, but out of truth. Because you've seen what you are when you're fully lit. When every cell, every thought, every step aligns with a single mission, and the world won't understand. It will resist you, laugh at you, doubt you. But obsession doesn't need to be understood. It only needs to be obeyed. It has no audience, only direction. It doesn't shout. It burns quietly, like a fuse beneath your ribs, waiting for the moment everything explodes into something irreversible. That is the nature of real breakthroughs, not gentle, not peaceful, but violent in the most sacred way. A destruction of the ordinary to make space for the extraordinary. And if you feel that flame inside you, don't put it out. Don't dilute it with logic. Don't smother it with comfort. Let it burn. Let it remake you. Let it drag you, if necessary, into the version of yourself you were always meant to become. Because once you cross that threshold, you stop living a life, you start living a legend. The invisible wall. While you're stuck in the possible, there's a wall inside you. You can't see it, but you felt it every time you got close to something extraordinary. It's not made of failure, it's made of reason, of logic, of all the well-meaning ideas you inherited about not pushing too hard, not going too far, not becoming too intense. They called it balance, but what it really became was a prison. Most people don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they're convinced that aiming higher is dangerous, that it's selfish, that it might cost them their sanity, their comfort, their relationships. So they settle. Not because they lack ambition, but because they've internalized the belief that wanting more is somehow wrong, that pushing harder means something inside you is broken, that wanting the impossible is arrogant, unrealistic, or delusional. But the truth is far simpler and far more brutal. You are not stuck because you've reached your limit. You are stuck because your mind has decided it's safer to believe in limits than to test them. The most powerful form of fear isn't loud, it's quiet. It speaks through caution. It whispers in the voice of moderation. It shows up as overthinking, as procrastination, as logic that sounds smart but kills action. And its goal is always the same: to keep you safe, even if it means keeping you small. The brain was not designed for greatness. It was designed for survival. It looks for patterns, protects energy, avoids pain. It wants safety, not legacy, comfort, not conquest. And the moment you start stepping beyond what's predictable, it fights back. It triggers your doubts. It floods you with excuses. It gives you 10 good reasons to stop. And if you're not prepared, you'll believe all of them. There is a part of your brain, the default mode network, whose job is to keep you within the known. It's the part that activates when you're not focused, not challenged, not pushed. It loops old thoughts, it recycles past failures. It keeps you tied to your identity as it is, not as it could be. And as long as you live inside that loop, even your dreams become cages. You'll visualize success but sabotage the execution. You'll talk about goals but never act like they're urgent, because biologically, you're being held hostage by the safety of familiarity. You weren't taught to chase the impossible. You were taught to manage your expectations, to be realistic, to find a steady job, a stable path, a predictable outcome. But predictable doesn't mean safe. It means forgettable. You were not built to decay slowly inside a life that doesn't challenge you. But that's exactly what happens when the wall inside you goes unbroken. You decorate it, justify it, accept it as truth, and then you live your whole life inside a room you were meant to escape. And the worst part, that wall looks like common sense, like self-care, like balance, but it is not balance to suppress the part of you that wants more. It is not wisdom to avoid the struggle that would make you stronger. You are not protecting yourself by playing small. You are abandoning yourself. There is no version of your future where you reach the impossible by staying reasonable. At some point, your mind has to be reprogrammed, not gently, but forcefully. You have to recognize that this invisible wall is not a reality. It's a habit, a thought pattern that has calcified into identity, and that identity must be dismantled. The first crack happens when you stop asking, "Is this realistic?" and start asking, "Is this necessary?" The moment you stop filtering your dreams through probability and start filtering them through urgency. When you wake up and realize that nothing changes until you do, radically, obsessively, without apology. That's when you begin to train your brain, not to believe in obsession but to obey it, to shift from hesitation to hunger, from preservation to possession, and it will hurt. Your ego will scream, your body will resist, your friends will question you, your old self will beg you to slow down. But keep going, because the wall only breaks when your desire becomes louder than your doubt, when your commitment becomes stronger than your caution. When the voice inside you stops asking for the world's permission and starts commanding your own. Once that happens, once you cross through the invisible wall, you realize it was never made of stone. It was made of your own hesitation, your own fear of what you could become if you actually tried, and now that you've tasted what's possible, going back is no longer an option. The obsession loop, the neurobiology of extreme focus. Obsession isn't just a feeling, it's not just a mindset. It's a biological phenomenon, a pattern that hijacks your entire nervous system, reshapes your cognitive loops, and rewires how you respond to the world. When you're obsessed, your brain stops working the way it used to. It doesn't ask for permission anymore. It doesn't need motivation. It doesn't seek comfort. It only seeks the next step forward, no matter the cost. There is a point where desire becomes fixation, and fixation becomes necessity. That point isn't spiritual, it's chemical. It's what happens when the brain begins to believe that this thing, this outcome, this goal, this mission, is not optional. It becomes a survival target. And once your brain categorizes something as survival, everything changes. Resistance shuts down. Excuses get deleted. Comfort becomes irrelevant. You stop asking whether it's hard. You start asking whether it's done. This is what I call the obsession loop. It's not mystical. It's mechanical. Every time you visualize the goal, every time you take one small step, every time you deny distraction and return to the mission, you reinforce a neural path. You strengthen the loop. And the more it fires, the more automatic it becomes. Until the goal no longer feels far away, it feels like gravity, like something pulling you forward without negotiation. But here's the part they don't tell you. Obsession mimics addiction. The same dopamine circuits that drive a heroin user to the next hit are the ones you must learn to control and weaponize. Most people abuse that circuit unconsciously. You'll see it in how they scroll endlessly, how they chase likes, how they binge shows. But what if you rewired that same neurological mechanism toward a singular, meaningful outcome? Because that's possible. Your brain doesn't care what it obsesses over. It only responds to intensity, repetition, and emotional charge. If you provide those three things with enough consistency, your brain will begin to crave what you program into it. Whether it's destruction or discipline, that's the terrifying part. And also the liberating part. You are already obsessed with something. You just may not be aware of it. You may already be running a loop, and it's a loop of distraction, fear, blame, hesitation, delay. And if you don't actively rewire that loop, it becomes your personality. Your life becomes a series of rehearsed limitations. You become the kind of person who talks a lot but never moves. But when obsession is pointed in the right direction, toward the impossible, it becomes holy. It becomes pure. It becomes the engine that pushes you through failure without even flinching, because you're no longer reacting emotionally, you're operating mechanically. You wake up and execute, not because you feel like it, but because that's who you've become. Magnus Carlsen didn't become world champion by being disciplined. He became obsessed with every single variation of every single opening. Kobe Bryant didn't train at 4 a.m. because he was inspired. He trained at 4 a.m. because he didn't know how to live without it. Van Gogh didn't paint thousands of works because he had free time. He painted because he was possessed by something he couldn't name. And you're waiting to feel ready, to feel clear, to feel good about the grind. But the loop doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't need your comfort, it needs your repetition, your presence, your refusal to stop when the mood fades. You build the loop by action, not by emotion. You feed it with daily triggers, morning rituals, visual anchors, self-talk that reinforces who you are becoming. You starve distractions, you isolate focus, you track tiny wins. You raise the bar, and you keep raising it until your brain stops asking whether it's worth it, and starts accepting that this is simply how life works now. Eventually, obsession becomes silence. You stop needing to explain yourself. You stop sharing your plans. You stop asking what others think. You just work, you just build, you just become. While the world watches confused, you're in the lab, you're in the gym, you're in the studio, doing what needs to be done. And every rep, every draft, every attempt feeds the loop, until the work becomes reflex, until success becomes inevitable. And that's the secret. You don't reach the impossible by chasing intensity. You reach it by mastering repetition, by programming the mind to crave the work. That is the power of obsession. Not a moment of inspiration, a lifetime of neural alignment. From desire to necessity, training your brain to need the outcome. Desire is weak. It fades. It negotiates. It wants the outcome but not the price. That's why most people stay stuck, because they confuse wanting something with being ready to need it. But the brain doesn't move for desire. It moves for necessity, for survival. And until your goal becomes something your nervous system treats as non-negotiable, you will never break through. The real shift happens when you stop chasing a goal like a bonus and start treating it like oxygen. You don't wake up excited to breathe. You wake up and do it, because there's no other option. That's what obsession looks like when it evolves. It becomes the only acceptable path, the only story your brain will follow. Anything else becomes betrayal. Anything else becomes death. So how do you make your mind cross that line? How do you convince your brain that this isn't just something you want, but something you are? You begin by tying the goal to identity, not as a future version, as a present fact. You stop saying, "I want to become," and start saying, "I am," because the brain doesn't wait for proof. It responds to pattern. The moment you consistently behave as if it's already true, the mind adapts. It rewires. It stops filtering your actions through doubt and starts reinforcing them through alignment. You do this by building anchors, not motivational slogans, but identity reinforcers, visual cues that remind you of who you are becoming, repetitive actions that confirm the shift, statements you say to yourself out loud until your voice becomes law. You stop telling the story of your past and start telling the story of your future, in the present tense. But identity isn't enough. You need emotional weight. You need to stack pain behind the idea of not becoming who you're meant to be. If you keep the stakes low, your brain will choose comfort every time. But when you make the cost of staying the same feel unbearable, the mind flips. It begins to treat stagnation like a threat. It triggers the same survival response as danger. And now doing the hard thing doesn't feel hard. Not doing it feels unbearable. That's the emotional stacking process. You replay every consequence of staying small. You visualize regret with detail. You walk yourself through the future you're afraid of, not to suffer, but to create urgency, to make sure your nervous system understands. This is not a game. This is life or death, not physically. Existentially. Then you ritualize it. You don't wait for emotion to rise, you manufacture it. You build a morning that is sacred, a set of actions that signal to your mind, we are not who we were. You prime your focus. You reinforce your identity. You reactivate the goal every single day, not once, not when you feel like it, but until it's automatic, until not doing it feels like self-betrayal. The world is filled with people who want. Almost none of them act like they need. They float between goals, waiting for clarity. But clarity only comes after commitment, and commitment only comes when the inner standard shifts, when you raise the floor, not the ceiling, when the bare minimum becomes higher than most people's dreams. Necessity is the ultimate hack. When the goal becomes part of who you are, procrastination dies, resistance dies, distraction becomes irrelevant, because the brain only protects what it believes is essential. And the moment you teach it that this outcome is essential, everything else burns away. But don't expect applause. No one will clap when you start treating your dream like oxygen. They'll call you obsessed, intense, over the top. That's because they're still negotiating. You're not. You've made the decision and now your mind is following orders. This is not about motivation. This is about neural leverage. You are turning desire into identity, identity into urgency, urgency into survival, and survival into inevitability. That's how you train the brain to crave the impossible. Obsession versus compulsion, the dangerous edge. There is a line, subtle, dangerous, often invisible, a line between obsession and compulsion. One builds you, the other devours you. And if you don't learn to see it, you risk destroying everything you're trying to create. Obsession is chosen. Compulsion is escaped into. One is built on clarity, the other is fueled by avoidance. One sharpens your mind like a blade. The other chains you to the same repetitive motion, not because you want to, but because you have to. That difference matters, and it is the difference between greatness and collapse. Obsession is presence. Compulsion is panic. When you're obsessed, you move with intention. You know what you're doing and why. You can stop, reflect, redirect. You can endure pain, delay pleasure, walk through failure, because you're awake. You are not running from anything. You are running towards something so real that it burns in your chest like a second heart. But compulsion is different. It's noisy. It doesn't know why it acts, only that it must. You keep checking, keep tweaking, keep pushing, not because it's effective, but because stopping feels like death. That's not growth, that's collapse in disguise. You might look productive, even obsessed, but under the surface is a storm of fear, insecurity, guilt, and ego. You're no longer building, you're coping. Most people who burn out don't do it from too much work. They do it from too much compulsion. They replace awareness with repetition, reflection with urgency, rest with guilt, and slowly they lose the ability to think, to see, to choose. Everything becomes reactive. They mistake movement for progress, volume for mastery, hustle for purpose. And here's where it gets dangerous. The world celebrates both. It sees the fire, not the source. It doesn't know the difference between a person lit by vision and a person consumed by fear. It claps for the exhausted. It rewards the burned out. It puts gold medals on people who haven't been present in their own life for years. So you have to be the one to watch the line. No one will do it for you. You have to ask yourself constantly, am I moving from vision or running from shame? Is this work building something that matters, or is it just numbing what I don't want to face? And if the answer is uncomfortable, good. That means you're still in control. That means you can choose. Because obsession without reflection turns to poison. It corrodes your mind. It devours your relationships. It isolates you until the goal becomes more important than the person. And at that point, even if you reach it, you'll have no one left to celebrate with, not even yourself. But when obsession is guided by clarity, everything changes. It doesn't close your heart. It strengthens it. It doesn't push people away. It pulls the right ones closer. It doesn't numb you. It sharpens your senses. You work not to escape emotion, but to feel it fully and turn it into something useful, something clean, something sacred. This is not a call to slow down. It's a call to wake up, to inspect your drive, to sharpen your flame without letting it consume the structure. To remember that this isn't just about results, it's about who you become while building them. The discipline isn't just in the work, it's in the space between the work, in the silence, in the breath, in the ability to step back and ask, am I becoming someone I respect? Because obsession, when rooted in wisdom, makes you powerful. Compulsion, when left unchecked, makes you hollow. And no amount of success can fill a man who lost himself chasing it. So walk the edge, but walk it awake. Use your fire, don't drown in it. Let your focus be sharp, not blind. Let your drive be clean, not panicked. Let your actions rise from purpose, not from the fear of who you are when you're still. That's the only way obsession becomes a tool of transformation, instead of a mask for pain. The dark gym, building mental endurance in isolation. There's a place where obsession is forged. You won't find it in motivational speeches or highlight reels. You won't see it on Instagram or in the applause of strangers. It's called the dark gym. And everyone who has ever achieved something extraordinary has trained there, not once, not for a season, but for years. The dark gym isn't a location. It's a moment in your life when no one's watching and no one cares, when you're showing up and no one's clapping, when you're improving and no one notices, when you're sacrificing and no one even knows what you're working toward. It's silent, it's invisible. It's the phase where your results don't match your effort, and the question begins to form in your mind. Why am I doing this? That's where most people quit, because the ego doesn't know how to survive in obscurity. It craves feedback. It needs validation. But obsession doesn't. Obsession is quiet. It trains in silence. It doesn't need to be seen. It only needs to grow. When you're in the dark gym, there's no scoreboard, no one to compare yourself to, no metrics to prove your worth. It's just you and the work. And that's where something rare begins to happen. You stop performing. You stop pretending. You stop chasing attention. And you start becoming dangerous because you're no longer moved by praise or permission. You're moved by purpose. The dark gym is where your identity gets rewritten, where you fail in private, where you practice without reward, where you confront your limits not to impress anyone, but because you're not okay with staying the same. And if you can endure the silence long enough, your mind begins to shift. You stop expecting results. You start loving the repetition, the solitude, the clarity that only comes when all the noise fades. Most people hate the dark. They rush to escape it. They want spotlight, fast, proof now. But the ones who stay, who train without recognition, who prepare without praise, They build something the rest never will. Mental endurance, not motivation, not excitement, but a steel-bent focus that doesn't shatter under pressure. Because if you can stay consistent when no one's cheering, you've already won. If you can keep showing up when the world seems indifferent, you've already crossed into rare territory. You've become someone whose strength is internalized, self-fed, untouchable. And when that person steps into the light, the world won't know how to handle it. This is the paradox. The greater your future spotlight, the deeper your present isolation. The more remarkable your rise, the more invisible your preparation must be. And if you're not ready for that, if you still need someone to clap for you just to keep going, you're not obsessed, you're performing. But when the dark gym becomes your home, everything changes. You stop counting the days. You stop asking how long it will take. You stop needing someone to remind you why you started. Because now you've tasted something deeper than excitement, conviction. And conviction doesn't ask for applause, it just executes. It's in the early hours when no one's awake, in the quiet reps when no one's watching, in the skipped parties, the ignored distractions, the hundreds of deleted drafts, the failures that didn't make it to the feed. That's where power is born. In the dark, in the silence, where you face yourself fully and decide to keep going anyway, not for recognition, not for revenge, not for external reward, but because something in you refuses to live a life untested, because you would rather walk alone in truth than be surrounded in comfort, because you've seen the man you could become, and he's worth every second of obscurity. So if you're there now, in the dark gym, doubting, questioning, wondering if it matters, know this. The silence is your training ground. The loneliness is your sharpening stone. And the discipline you build here will follow you forever, long after the world finally sees what you've become. The final lock-in. Burn the ships. There comes a moment, one that splits your life in two. Before it, you're trying. After it, you're committed. That moment is the final lock-in, the point where you burn the ships and force your brain to accept that there is no way back. You know what happens when you give yourself an exit. You take it. When you keep a safety net, your mind falls into it. Not always in panic, sometimes in subtle ways. You procrastinate, you second guess, you say you're just being careful, but in truth, you're undecided. And a man who is undecided will always betray his own potential. Burning the ships means something ancient. It means you land on the shore of your next battle, and you set fire to every path that could carry you home. You remove the escape. You leave your past self no voice, no vote, no power. You declare to your nervous system, I am not returning, I am not negotiating, I am not available for the old life anymore. That's when everything sharpens, your perception clears, your senses align, because now the mission isn't a dream, it's a demand. The brain treats it differently when failure becomes unacceptable, when it's either win or die, not physically, spiritually. The death of the man who was too scared to become what he could have been. People will tell you to be careful, to keep options open, to have balance. But options are distractions wearing nice clothes. They are slow poisons, dead weight. Every time you say just in case, you plant seeds of doubt. And those seeds don't stay small. They grow into roots that twist around your action, your clarity, your energy, until you can no longer move forward without dragging a corpse behind you. The world worships commitment in theory, but fears it in practice, because real commitment is violent. It destroys the parts of you that hesitate. It tears the comfort out of your routines. It demands sacrifice not once, but repeatedly, until your old self no longer recognizes you. But what rises from that fire is something terrifying to everyone else. Because a man who has nothing to return to is a man who cannot be stopped. He's no longer seduced by convenience, no longer addicted to comfort. He works when he's tired. He shows up when it's inconvenient. He focuses when the world screams for his attention, because he's already paid the price for indecision, and he won't pay it again. This is the final lock-in. It doesn't happen by accident. It's a ritual, a choice, a private execution of all the excuses you've used to delay your greatness. And you don't need a ceremony. You need one honest moment, one decision that says, from this point forward, I will become the man who finishes. No halfway, no fallback, no illusion of maybe. Burning the ships is not reckless, it's required. Because until you do, part of you will still belong to the old world, to the version of you that settles, that hesitates, that dreams without acting, that speaks with passion, but lives without it. And as long as that version exists, it will fight your rise, it will whisper when you're tired, it will plead with you when you're alone, it will seduce you when you feel weak. But if you've burned the ships, it has no home, no shelter, no return. So look at your life, find the ship, the one you keep tied just in case. Maybe it's a job, maybe it's a habit, maybe it's a belief, maybe it's a person. Whatever it is, you know it's there. You've kept it close, not because it serves you, but because it makes quitting easier. Set it on fire. Watch what happens when your mind realizes this isn't a test run. This is the mission. This is the identity. This is the only direction. That's when obsession stops being effort and becomes instinct. That's when the impossible becomes not just likely but inevitable. That's when the old version of you dies and something unshakable rises in its place. Closing message: the glorious consequence of obsession. There's something sacred about the end of a transformation. Not loud, not public, just a quiet sense of knowing that you no longer move like you used to, no longer think like you used to, that the version of you who doubted, delayed, hesitated, has gone silent. Obsession changes more than outcomes. It changes identity, not by force but by fire. It burns away the noise, the compromise, the part of you that once needed to be understood. What's left is cleaner, sharper, more direct. The kind of clarity that no longer asks, can I, but how far? And when you reach that place, not a destination but a state, you realize something powerful. You never needed permission. The people who tried to slow you down were only speaking from their own limits. The fears that once ruled your mind were never truths, only echoes. And the voices that told you to be realistic were only warning you not to rise above them. Obsession doesn't make you special, it makes you responsible, because now you see what's possible, and you can never unsee it. You can't go back to living numb, to faking progress, to calling average good enough. The fire doesn't let you forget. You walk through the world differently, not louder, but heavier. You speak less, but when you do, people listen. Not because of volume, but because of weight. Because you've carried something. Because you've paid the price in silence. Because you're no longer guessing who you are. You're still building, still climbing, still grinding. But something in you has locked in. The mind no longer bargains. The body no longer waits. The soul no longer apologizes. This is what it looks like when obsession is no longer effort, it's identity. And the world will notice. Not all at once, not in the beginning, but slowly. People will feel the shift in your presence. They'll ask how you changed. They'll want to know your secret. But you won't have an answer, because there isn't one. There's only the truth you chose to live when no one else was watching. You burned the ships, you trained in the dark, you rewired the brain. You built what others were too afraid to imagine, and now, you are the proof. So let this be a reminder. You don't need more tips, more hacks, more half-hearted advice. You need commitment. You need a flame that won't go out. You need obsession that bends reality around your will. And if this journey, these words, lit something inside you, carry it forward. Not just for yourself, but for the ones watching in silence, wondering if it's possible. Show them what happens when someone goes all in. No exits, no excuses. And if you're ready to keep walking that path, if you're building something in the dark and you know the fire is real, then stay close. Subscribe. Drop your thoughts below. Not for the algorithm, but to mark the moment you decided you would never return to who you used to be.